Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video, I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Growing Hunger Magic Arena Starter deck. We'll be upgrading the deck in two stages. First, I'll show you how to upgrade it with only commons and uncommons, and then I'll show you some of the rares and mythics you can use if you have a few extra wild cards, though I do caution you to spend those wisely as they are difficult to obtain. So Growing Hunger is a Golgari +1/+1 counters deck. It has things like Grakmaw, Oran Reef Ooze, Vorinclex as big payoffs for having +1/+1 counters. Grakmaw will soak up counters as other creatures die that have counters on them, and then it spits out a token based on its power, which it's going to be a bigger token the bigger Grakmaw is. The Ooze will put out a counter when it enters, and then gives everything on your board counters as it attacks, everything that has a counter already, which basically everything in this deck does, or will when we're done with it. And Vorinclex doubles all the counters we place. We put a counter on something, we get two of them instead, so very powerful. And for the most part, there isn't a lot of off-theme cards in this deck. There are just some weaker cards, Feign Death, Litjara, Glade Warden, Moss Pit Skeleton. These all technically deal with counters, but we just have way more powerful and better things we could be playing here, so they're fine, they're on theme, but they're not very good. So let's get into our upgrades. First, we'll take out 3 Moss Pit Skeletons for 3 Malakir Coldblades. I would be more happy with the skeletons if they return to our hand, but they don't. They return from our graveyard to the top of our library, which it doesn't actually offer card advantage. It's fine, but it's not like I'm not blown away by it. The Coldblades, on the other hand, they get bigger and bigger as our opponent's creatures die, and there is a lot of removal in this deck, and generally our creatures are pretty big in this deck, so it just gets bigger and bigger throughout the game, gets bigger faster if we have Vorinclex. And I will say that these are only playable in best of one. This is one of those weird cards that Arena has that are only playable in best of one for some reason. We do have an alternative that's actually better, but it is a rare, so we'll look at that closer later. But this card, we'll be adding this in this place in the rare section if you want to play best of 3. Next, we're going to take out a tenured Inkcaster for a Froghemoth. I know you're thinking, but that's a rare. Excuse me, I thought this was budget. I'm a big stupid idiot, like I mentioned in the previous video. I'm an idiot, and for some reason I just never considered the fact that I can use the rares from other decks, because you have those automatically. You have all the rares in the other decks. So in this case, Froghemoth, it was in the Avalanche deck, or one of them was, no, Savage Lands. It was in Savage Lands, so you're guaranteed to have it. You have this on your account. It's free. You have it, and it works perfectly fine. It gets counters as it hits people. So it's a rare. It's a good rare. It's better than Inkcaster, and it's free. So there you go. Definitely add that. For the same reason, we'll take out another Inkcaster for a Westgate Regent. This was in the Treasure Hunt deck, and it's amazing in this deck because the counters can be doubled with Vorinclex. It's a 4/4. If you hit with a Vorinclex in play, it doesn't get 4 counters, it gets 8 counters. Comes a 12/12 on one hit, and it just gets bigger and bigger. But it gets crazy big, crazy fast with Vorinclex. Also, I didn't talk about the Inkcaster much on the last screen. It's okay. The big problem with it is this deck is more about building like one big creature as opposed to going super wide. If we were putting out a bunch of tokens and then dispersing a bunch of counters on a whole bunch of tokens, Inkcaster would be insane. But in this deck, we typically have like 3 or 4 really big creatures, and the Inkcaster just kind of feels like a waste. We can't get a ton of value out of it, and I'd just rather have another big threat in that place. So it's okay. I don't really like it that much, and it doesn't really fit with what we're doing, which is building one big creature instead of a bunch of small ones. Next, I want to take out 3 power word kills for, well, basically any removal spell that's not power word kill. This would normally be like a top tier removal spell. It's insane, but unfortunately in the standard format right now, some of the best creatures are dragons and angels, so I'd much rather just play like Bloodchief's Thirst or Infernal Grasp. Both of these are fine. Any combination of them is fine. If you want to play 2 Thirsts and 1 Infernal Grasp, that's fine. Any combination of those, whatever. Just not power word kill, just because it can't kill, you know, Goldspan Dragon and whatnot. So we just can't play that because of the number of dragons in the metagame. Lastly, I want to take out the 3 Feigned Deaths for 3 Snakeskin Veils. Both of these do the same thing in that they protect a creature from dying and they put a counter on it, right? Feigned Death brings it back, puts a counter on it. Snakeskin Veil counters a removal spell, puts a counter on it. The veils are a little bit better though, just because Feigned Death means we will lose the counters. Like if we have a creature with 4 +1/+1 counters on it and we use Feigned Death, it'll come back and get another counter, but it'll lose those original 4. And the veil isn't just good against removal, it's also good against bounce spells. And the Is It Spells deck, it plays a lot of bounce spells. You've probably seen these bounce spells. These are common, so Snakeskin Veil, I think a little bit better in this environment. Technically, when a creature trades, the veil isn't as good, but I think because there's a top tier deck playing a ton of bounce spells, there's just lots of bounce in the format right now. I think the veil is a little bit better in this slot in the current metagame. And that's the budget build. Yes, this is unfortunately one of the decks that does require some rares and mythics to really finish it, but at least we got a couple of free ones, so we have some, good top end finishers, and that should help a lot. We have a lot of removal. I think the deck is solid. It's some fillery stuff, but it's pretty okay. And this deck will get pretty crazy. It gets chunky, you might say, with just a few rares. So first off, we'll take out 3 big plays for 3 Ranger class. You're probably familiar with this card. It's played in all of the green decks. It's a 2-mana enchantment, puts out a 2/2 right away, and then once you level it up, it distributes a +1/+1 counter every single time you attack, which is perfect in this deck. It's already a great card, and the +1/+1 counter is even more on theme for this deck, so that's great. Next, we'll take out 2 Hagra Constrictors for 2 Oran Reef Oozes. While it's true we lose the Menace, the Oozes allow us to just overwhelm the opponent by distributing counters across our entire board every single time we attack. Gets kind of crazy. Basically, we're choosing to go big at the cost of some evasion, that being the Menace, but I think our creatures will be bigger than our opponents anyway, so I'm not super concerned about the Menace. And Oran Reef Ooze just gets kind of nutty, so we'll go with that. Next, I want to take out the Skyclave Shadowcat for another Grakmaw. I just don't think the Shadowcat is very good. The card draw is amazing. Being able to draw a card every time something dies is great, but I just don't really want to play a 4-mana 3/3. You want to be on the offense. You're the stompy deck trying to punch through to the opponent. So a 4-mana 3/3, even though it draws cards, I'm kind of so on it. There are definitely scenarios where the cat can be insane, but it can also feel kind of useless in some games, whereas Grakmaw is just basically always amazing. So we'll go with that. Next, we'll take out Littjara Glade Warden for another Grakmaw. The Glade Warden is just expensive and unreliable. It's just so hard to generate counters, and Grakmaw is just amazing. Great card, works well in this deck. Perfectly happy to have that. I also think we could take out the final Inkcaster for another Vorinclex. Like I said earlier, the Inkcasters aren't as impactful as I would like, and Vorinclex is just obscene in this deck, so I'm happy to have another one of those. I also want to take out a Dragon's Guard Elite for, well, much like Power Word Kill, basically anything. Dragon's Guard Elite is amazing in a deck with a lot of pump spells. There is a popular kind of tier 2, tier 3 deck that plays a bunch of green-white pump spells. That's really cool, but this isn't that deck. We don't have enough spells to really make this worth it. It just feels pretty weak in this list. So taking it out for another Ochre Jelly, a 3rd Vorinclex, anything really, anything that deals with +1/+1 counters, maybe even like another Malakir Callblade, or even like a Serulf. A Serulf would be cool. But basically anything, but Dragon's Guard Elite just doesn't really work well in this deck, so anything that deals with +1/+1 counters is probably better. And finally, we can replace the Struggle for Skemfars for 3 Inscription of Abundance. So the inscriptions do all the same stuff. It can give out counters, it has the fight mechanic, but it can also gain some life if we need it, and for 5 mana we get all of the effects, and it just feels great when we do that. The Skemfars feel a little clunky. The Foretelling, I don't want to be spending mana 2 turns in a row to play this, and at 4 mana it just doesn't feel great. So Inscription, just very good, definitely recommend that. And also, like I mentioned earlier, you can take out the Malakir Callblades for Slaughter Specialist, which is not only playable in best of 3, but it's also just the better option in my opinion. It gives the opponent a token, whatever. It's a 2-mana 3/3 that starts getting counters. Like it better than the Callblades, so definitely go with that if you have some. We can also improve the mana base by replacing Woodland Chasms with Deathcap Glades. The Glades sometimes enter tapped, but the Chasms always enter tapped, so pretty easy there. Also, basics for pathways. because why draw a forest or a swamp when you can draw either, depending on which one you need, with the pathway. Also replacing a couple basics for one each of the Forgotten Realms creature lands, probably worth it. Always nice to have a couple of these in the mana base, and that's it. Unfortunately, we did need a ton of rares and mythics. This was one of the more expensive ones. It's also probably, at least at the start, one of the least competitive ones. There's no top tier competitive deck that plays with +1/+1 counters, so it's already like not a winning strategy. And then it takes a ton of rares and mythics to soup it up, but it does get really cool. It's really fun to play, especially when you draw Vorinclex. The Vorinclex hands are super fun if you can get to that point. It takes 6 turns, but it is pretty cool. So I don't think it's bad. It's definitely, without question, better than what we started with. But either way, guys, thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful. I hope this series was helpful. We are done with the decks, so hopefully those guides are useful. Again, links in the description to the playlist if you want to see all the upgrade guides. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.